The Ridley Scott crafted world of Alien makes its television debut with Alien Earth. So here's a recap of the first 2 episodes, as well as what we think it means for the rest of the season, and potentially beyond. After some expositional text on screen, we find out that the year is 2120, which is exactly 2 years before the original Alien was set. The opening of the show is a very clear homage to the original Alien, as the scene is nearly identical to each other, with a few modern updates. The scene is meant to invoke that sense of confusion and also togetherness that the original Alien dinner scene did. We even get a couple actors that look very familiar or even identical to some old school actors. And this is clearly all done on purpose to, hey, remember Alien? It is also during this scene that we find out that the Weylan Corporation is not the only ones that we're going to be contending with. There's even a new corporation called Prodigy. The scene is very short-lived, however, as we get some flash cuts to what appears to be an alien taking over the ship. We then cut back to Earth, where we meet Timothy Olyphant's character, Kirsh. He's having a conversation about life and death with a girl who appears to be dying from some sort of vague illness. It's never really explained, but you see the IV bag, so we kind of put 2 and 2 together. We actually find out that the girl that we see is dying, and the only way that for her to be saved is to turn her body into a synthetic one. Well, not really turn, but put her mind into the body of a robot. That's basically what's going on. There's a lot of other talk, but she's putting her mind in a robot, right? And once she does this, she actually changes her name, and the world is introduced to Wendy, the first human-synthetic hybrid that we've ever seen. As the procedure turns out to be a success, we find out that she is only the first of many that they planned on doing, as a new group of kids come in and also do the procedure. They also all happen to be dying, and this is the only way that they could live. All of these projects end up going off without a hitch, and these new human synthetic beings are called the Lost Boys, and they will be a main player for the rest of the series. One important thing to note about these Lost Boys is that they are in adult bodies. However, they keep the minds of the children that they were when they went in there. They explain this way by saying that the synthetic body won't age, so putting them in a children's body would be weird when their mind finally matures enough, because then they look like a kid, but they have an adult mind, and so they figured, let's just cut that out. We'll put them all in adult bodies. However, this does lead to some pretty funny hijinks, I would say, as all of these adults having to act like kids, and we're going to see how that changes throughout the series. After all of the Lost Boys get their new, cool synthetic bodies, we then cut back to the Weylan ship, where, surprise, surprise, an alien has taken over the ship. The only survivor happens to be Morrow, the synthetic that we met earlier, that was kind of being a little weird, as you would say. They're being synthetic, so what can you expect? However, unlike the original Xenomorph, they are doing a lot more damage than just killing the people on board, as they seem to be destroying the ship, making it crash land in the middle of Earth, in the middle of a city, I should say. Oh my God, it's just buildings and stuff. It's crazy. The ship actually crash lands in the middle of a Prodigy-owned apartment building, and as we know, Prodigy is one of the 5 corporations that basically run the world. These corporations are basically their own countries at this point. A squad of soldiers goes to investigate the crash site, and this is where we find out that the medic on staff is actually Wendy's brother. And once Wendy finds out about this, she takes the Lost Boys as well as Kirsh to the crash site in order to find her long-lost brother, who also thinks she's dead. So with Kirsh serving as the leader of the team, Wendy and the rest of the Lost Boys goes to this crash site in order to investigate for one, and also to find her long-lost brother. However, spoiler alert, they find an alien. Not just one alien, there's quite a few more creepy crawlies that we find throughout the episode, beyond the Xenomorph, who's, just murdering everything. From the very first frame of this series, we are told what the overarching theme is going to be, and that is, what is life? How can people become immortal? After these trillionaires have gained everything they can in this world, what is left to gain except for eternal life? And that's the hunt that all of these CEOs and executives are trying to find, as they've gotten everything in the world. They've even gotten everything on other worlds. There's an offhanded line where they talk about how one company has Mars and one company has the moon. So where do you go from here? As we know from the countless Alien films, the Weylan-Yutani group believes that the Xenomorph is the key to unlocking eternal life, or at least the next step towards this, while the Prodigy Corporation believes that these human-synthetic hybrids could be the next step in our evolution. The journey of what it means to be human and how it pertains to these lost boys who were sick and now are in synthetic bodies. What does that mean? Are they human? Are they robots? Are they a combination of the two? Is it really the person that they were, or is this a brand new person? All of these lofty sci-fi questions are going to be answered throughout the series. We already saw a few glimpses of the setup to this story, and as the season progresses, we're sure to get more and more from that. Now, besides the existential, lofty sci-fi elements, a lot of you are asking right now, or maybe even screaming at me right now, what about the aliens? Now, I am happy to report that the Xenomorph definitely gets its day in the sun. Throughout these first 2 episodes, there are at least 5 different kills. He was killing, all right? He was going crazy. The tail was going crazy. And also, it is also pretty cool to see that it's a guy in a suit. Whether or not it's a budgetary restriction, or maybe they were trying to go back to the old school ways of doing this, but that kind of lower budget feel makes this series more tactile. That can go with everything about this series. A lot of this practical ship design, you can tell that there was a lot of thought and attention put into this series, trying to make it feel like the 1979 film did, with all of the real sets and all of the amazing cinematography and all that fun stuff. However, with all of that Xenomorph killing going on, in a rare change of pace, it's actually the Xenomorph, the one being hunted by these 2 different factions of Prodigy and Weylan-Yutani. Now that the alien is on Earth, it's a race in order to find this Xenomorph, in order to, well, for one, study it and try and find a way to profit on it, but also to stop it from infecting the entire world. Because once that gets out, we're screwed. I mean, you saw what 1 did. Well, imagine 20. What are we doing? This leads me to believe that a majority of this season will be a cat and mouse game between Prodigy and Weylan-Yutani, finding ways to try and capture the Xenomorph from the others. We get a brief glimpse of the tension between the 2 parties as a kind of an ironic FaceTime call happens that somewhat calls to war between the 2, as it is Weylan-Yutani property. However, it landed on Prodigy land. So the fight for the data is going to be, they're a bunch of buttheads, so they're not gonna give that up. Of course, leading the charge for these 2 companies to find this Xenomorph, as well as all the other aliens on board, is Morrow for the Weylan-Yutani group and Wendy for the Prodigy group. These 2 different takes on synthetics will inevitably clash at some point. Whether or not that's a physical clash, like a fist fight, or an emotional or existential clash, with the 2 very different cyborg alien ideas, with one being much more subservient to its master, while the other is its own person, or so we think so far. There are definitely some elements that the Prodigy group is claiming that maybe there's more going on underneath the surface than just a regular synthetic. It is clear that Morrow and Wendy will have to come at odds at some point. And while the differences between the 2 are clear at first, there are some small, subtle things that Morrow has done so far that prove he might not be as simplistic as the original synthetic is, maybe not as subservient as we think a synthetic should be. This could mean that Morrow is on a path of self-discovery, and who better to discover that self when another synthetic, a more human-like synthetic, that maybe can unlock the human side of Morrow, despite never really being a human. There's a lot of places that this storyline can go, and honestly, none of them are really wrong. They all seem interesting. It's up to the show to see where they want to go from here. And while Meryl and Wendy are battling on a more existential and personal level, we also have the grandiose nature of Prodigy and Weylan. Now, we see that they're both racing to find the Xenomorph, as well as all the other aliens on this lost ship. However, this could be leading towards a more, let's say, clear confrontation between the two. And when you consider the fact that these businesses are basically kingdoms with their own armies and own businesses and own land, we could be seeing the start of a potential war between these two corporations. As I mentioned before, we see a lot more than just the traditional Xenomorph, as a lot more aliens make their appearance, showing that the universe is much bigger than we have seen so far. And from what we've seen so far, there is likely a lot more weird alien stuff to come. In a conversation between Cavalier and one of his top scientists, Dame Silva, we understand what his true motivations are for creating these synthetic androids. Simply put, he says he wants to have a conversation with someone or something smarter than himself. Now, at first, this might seem like weird, billionaire, in this case, trillionaire talk. But what he really means is he wants to feel wonder. And in a world where everything is given to you, like a trillionaire is, it is clear that the wonder of the world has been taken away from this guy. So seeing these new, unexplored, unimaginable creatures like the Xenomorphs and all of the other creatures we've seen so far enlist that excitement back in him of new and something else to figure out and conquer. This series is attempting to tackle a number of different sci-fi elements that we've seen throughout all of science fiction, including Alien. Despite being a TV series, it is quite impressive to see how much of the practical and digital effects they're able to accomplish to give almost a movie-like quality to each episode so far. They also do a great job of bringing back that 1979 terror that we all felt while watching the very first Alien. How did you feel about these first two episodes? Was there any plot elements that you noticed that you think are going to be picked up on later in the season or potentially after that? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you for watching Screen Rant. Be sure to check out more of our videos on your favorite franchises.